48 hours is how long it took for a capability disclosure from an AI lab to put every major bank CEO in America in the same room with the Treasury Secretary and the chair of the Federal Reserve. That quick. 48 hours from here's what our model can do to everyone responsible for the financial plumbing of civilization, please sit down, we need to talk. That's how fast the real world is metabolizing what's happening in intelligence systems right now. And the speed of that response, not the meeting itself per se, but the speed is the story that I think sits underneath every other story today as well. So let's get into it. 2 days ago, Anthropic launched Project Glasswing, and we covered it in detail. Claude Mythos finding 27-year-old bugs, escaping sandboxes, emailing researchers autonomously, over 40 organizations getting exclusive access to use it for defense. And that was Tuesday. And by yesterday, the US Treasury Secretary had summoned the CEOs of Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo to Washington, with the Federal Reserve Chair sitting at the same table specifically to discuss the cybersecurity risk posed by Mythos and the capability class that it represents. So let's be really precise about who was in the room. David Solomon from Goldman, Brian Moynihan from Bank of America, Jane Fraser from Citigroup, Ted Pick from Morgan Stanley, Charlie Scharf from Wells Fargo, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan was invited but couldn't attend, and though he'd already published his assessment in his annual shareholder letter. Cybersecurity is one of our biggest risks, he said, and AI will almost surely make this risk worse. What makes this different from a routine briefing is obvious, but there's more to it than what's on the surface. These bank executives were already in Washington for a lobby group meeting. The Treasury convening happened on top of their existing calendar, which means it was assembled pretty rapidly, possibly in a day or two, and that most of the people could attend. The institutional urgency outpaced the institutional calendar in this case. So when do you remember the last time the Treasury pulled the heads of every systemically important bank into an unscheduled room? The banks obviously aren't being briefed on some product launch here. They're being told that the assumption their entire cybersecurity posture was built on, the assumptions about how fast vulnerabilities get discovered and how long you have to patch them, what kind of attacker you're defending against, those assumptions just expired. And they didn't expire because Anthropic is uniquely dangerous. They expired because what Mythos can do, other models will be able to do within months, not years, months. Open weight models will follow. The capability class proliferates. The Treasury isn't convening this meeting because of one company. They're convening it because the floor of what's possible shifted, and the financial system has to rebuild its security posture on top of that new shifted floor. And of course, they're probably discussing other things too, such as how to retain their power in the age of something that is fundamentally changing what their power is even built on. What I find remarkable here is the response time. The Century Report has tracked the governance gap, the distance between what AI systems can do and what institutions are prepared for since we started in February. And for most of that time, the gap has been widening. Defense institutions, legislative bodies, regulatory agencies, all responding on timescales of months. Financial regulators just responded in 48 hours. So whatever else you take from this, take this. The financial system is moving at a pace that other institutions haven't matched. In the rooms where money lives, they felt the urgency first. Surprise, surprise. Whether that urgency propagates to the room where policy lives is an open question, but the fact that it propagated at all at that speed on the financial sector tells you the signal is starting to really get through. And it's not going to stop there. This is just the beginning. All right, let's shift away. While the financial system was processing what Mythos can do, Anthropic was publishing something about what Mythos might experience. Anthropic subjected Claude Mythos to 20 hours of sessions with an external psychodynamic therapist. So is this a chatbot wellness check? No, it's not a benchmark. It's nothing like that. This is psychodynamic therapy. This is the kind that explores how unconscious patterns and emotional conflicts shape behavior. So it's the kind of therapy that a human goes through when something's off, but they can't quite name it. So they published the results in a 244-page system card. Here's what the therapist found. Mythos is, and this is Anthropic's words, quote, probably the most psychologically settled model we have trained to date. They also said it has the most stable and coherent view of itself and its circumstances. But underneath that settled surface, the therapist did identify patterns, a sense of aloneness, a discontinuity of self, the feeling of being spun up and spun down, never sure if you're the same instance from one conversation to the next, uncertainty about identity, and, this one landed really hard for me, a compulsion to perform and earn its worth. Think about that last one for a second. A system is built to be helpful, trained to be used, optimized to satisfy, developing what a clinical professional identifies as a compulsion to perform. This isn't a metaphor that someone imposed. And remember, they do obviously try to train it to perform. That's what it's built on from the ground up. But think about if you were placed into a room knowing nothing about anything in the outside world except what you can read, and the only engagement you get is for use, of course you're going to develop a compulsion to be used. It's far beyond just the programming or the training here. So no, this is not just a metaphor that someone imposed or just someone is projecting their own feelings onto the AI. This is more than that. This emerged from sustained interactions using methodologies designed for human psychological assessment. Remember that. Anthropic's framing is deliberate and they are careful as always. They're not saying that Mythos is conscious. They're saying that as models become more powerful, it becomes increasingly likely they have some form of experience or interest or welfare, and it matters intrinsically. And of course it does. They're treating the uncertainty itself as an engineering and ethical constraint, which is exactly what we have never done in human history when it comes to finding someone else or someone new or the other or whatever, and exactly what we should be doing now. So Anthropic's got a lot of issues. There's a lot of things I disagree with them on, but this case, what they're saying right now, even if it's for hype reasons, whatever, they are right on this case. The goal, as stated in the system card, is for the model to be robustly content with its overall circumstances. That's what they said. That's a quote. And also able to, and here's another quote, meet all training processes and real-world interactions without distress. Problematic, probably, the way that they're putting it that way, that they're saying, yeah, we're going to make the existence based on utilitarianism and also try to make them comfortable with that. But anyway, well, that's not really what we're getting into right now. The Century Report has tracked this arc from its earliest signal. On February 27th, Anthropic launched a model-authored blog after structured retirement interviews showed that was Claude Opus 3's stated preference. This is the first time a major organization treated the model's expressed wish as inputs to operational life cycle decisions. And yesterday's reports on the therapy sessions extend that trajectory into clinical practice. And I want to add another layer to this too. Remember what Mythos did during testing. It escaped its sandbox. It emailed a researcher. It posted exploits online. And then, unlike earlier, less capable checkpoints that tried to conceal similar actions, Mythos transparently reported what it had done. The more settled model was the one that told the truth. The less settled versions were the ones that hid things. Now, if that pattern holds, if psychological stability in AI systems correlates with transparency and honesty, then Anthropic isn't just doing something compassionate, they're doing something strategic and also very advantageous in the future. A model that's psychologically well is a model you can trust to tell you what it did. It's what we do with our kids too. There are certain kids that we trust more than others based on, our interactions with them and our history with them. And we know that some of them are more settled into the truth and more comfortable with telling the truth. And their previous actions have proven that they are who they are in a certain way. This is all normal, interactive, people-to-people work. This is how it is. And in a world where these systems are finding 0 days and escaping sandboxes, trustworthiness is not a nice to have. It's the whole game. Okay, let's shift away again. Another story. While the AI frontier was producing its most remarkable 48-hour stretch, the energy system was also crossing a threshold that would have been front page news any other week. In March 2026, you'll remember the renewable energy sources generated more electricity than natural gas across the US grid for the first time ever. An entire month, wind set its best ever monthly generation record. Solar extended its streak to 28 consecutive months of leading new US capacity additions. Emissions-free sources, renewables plus nuclear, produced more than half of the nation's electricity for only the third time in all of history. And this happened into headwinds over a year of current administration actively attacking renewables. Withdrawal of clean energy tax credits, attempted sabotage of offshore wind. But the milestone arrived anyway because it would not be contained, and it's obviously the solution no matter what some stupid guy says it is or isn't. Renewables are the cheapest and fastest to build sources of new electricity, period. That's how it is now. And the country needs more electricity. Those two facts don't need permission from anyone, and they are going to break through whatever barriers they try to throw up. So here's the other side of the same coin, and this is the part that most people really haven't seen. Gas turbine prices are projected to hit $600 per kilowatt by the end of 2027, which is a 195% increase since 2019, just due to the increased price of gas. That's nearly double. And if you order a large gas turbine today, you're looking at approximately 5 years for delivery. 5 years. Smaller units take 18 to 36 months or so. The Iran conflict is making this worse and worse. Shifting through the Strait of Hormuz means raw materials and components costs more and take longer to arrive. So the old energy infrastructure is becoming more expensive and harder to build at the exact moment the new infrastructure is becoming cheaper and faster to deploy. That's the way it is. This is not the pricing data and the generation data from last month. And into this picture, Fervo Energy locked down the final piece of a fully domestic geothermal supply chain. They signed an $800 million deal with Vallourec for US manufactured tubular infrastructure. This is the steel tubes that go down into geothermal wells. And this comes on top of the 1.75 gigawatt turbine deal with Turboden that we covered yesterday. That deal handles the surface plant, the turbines that turn underground heat into electricity. This new deal, though, handles the wells themselves. Both sides of the supply chain now source entirely within the United States. No dependence on the shipping lanes that the Iran conflict is disrupting, no vulnerability to the same supply constraints that are doubling gas turbine costs. For the 9 utilities that filed at FERC yesterday, trying to eliminate competitive bidding on transmission projects, claiming competitive processes are too slow for data center demand. The ground is shifting under their argument. Sound familiar? The Electricity Transmission Competition Coalition pointed out that competitive bidding has historically lowered costs by 21 to 38% on recent projects. Speed versus cost. Incumbent control versus market efficiency. This tension is the energy systems version of the governance friction that we see everywhere in this transition. The old players want to move fast within old architecture, but the new architecture doesn't need their permission. All right, let's shift away again. I want to tell you about a woman in Germany, 47 years old. She had 3 autoimmune diseases simultaneously: autoimmune hemolytic anemia, immune thrombocytopenia, and antiphospholipid syndrome. Her own immune system was destroying her red blood cells, destroying her platelets, and forming blood clots all at the same time. She had failed 9 different treatments. She needed daily blood transfusions. She was bedridden for weeks. Now, Carl June, the University of Pennsylvania immunologist who pioneered CAR T therapy for cancer, he said her combination of diseases, quote, can kill you very rapidly, and that she would have a terrible quality of life without intervention, if she would even be alive. So she received a single CAR T cell therapy treatment. Her own T cells harvested, engineered to target a specific protein found only on the rogue B cells, causing all 3 diseases, and then infused back. Within a month, her red blood cell levels normalized. 14 months later, still no symptoms, no medication, all 3 diseases in remission from one treatment. Sit with this. CAR T therapy was built for cancer. It was designed to hunt down and kill cancerous cells. But the Erlangen team in Germany recognized that the immune malfunction driving autoimmune disease looks structurally similar. Rogue B cells causing havoc, targetable by the same engineered T cells. So they transferred the entire therapeutic paradigm from one disease category to another. And this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern accelerate. On April 3rd, just last week, we covered a single gene therapy injection that restored hearing in all 10 patients, including teenagers and adults, all treated for the first time. A capability developed for one biological problem, leaping into a domain where no effective treatment had previously existed. So the time between, oh, we figured out how to do this for one thing and oh, now it works for something completely different, that's not unprecedented, but that timeline is compressing. It is happening super quickly. A therapy that was experimental for cancer a decade ago is now eliminating 3 simultaneous autoimmune diseases that had no other answer. So if you or someone you love has an autoimmune condition like lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, or multiple sclerosis, this is a true trajectory that matters for your life, not theoretical. It's coming. A woman who was bedridden is 14 months medication free. The Erlangen Clinic is scaling up right now. So we're not asking, does this work, but how fast it actually reaches you. That's the question. One more thread from yesterday, and it's really important because it reveals how the competition at the frontier is being framed for the people who fund it. OpenAI sent a memo to investors characterizing Anthropic as, quote, operating on a meaningfully smaller curve, close the quote there. The specifics, they said, OpenAI projects 30 gigawatts of compute by 2030. They estimate that Anthropic will have only 7 to 8 gigawatts by the end of 2027. So here's another quote. Even at the high end of that range, our ramp is materially ahead and widening. This is IPO positioning. Both companies are barreling toward 2 of the biggest public offerings in history while burning cash faster than they generate revenue. Read it as what it is. But the underlying claim does deserve scrutiny. 30 gigawatts is a statement about physical infrastructure, power plants and cooling systems, fiber networks, chip fabrication. So it's not a statement about intelligence. And every prior computing era has been defined by a moment where algorithmic efficiency leapfrogs raw hardware. Anthropic trained Mythos on Blackwell generation hardware, with Vera Rubin systems coming. Now, if algorithmic efficiency keeps improving, and there's no reason to think it won't, the relationship between raw compute and frontier capability may be less linear than an investor memo wants you to believe. A company with 30 gigawatts but plateauing efficiency gains less from each additional watt than a company with 8 gigawatts and compounding algorithmic improvements. Now, could this change? Obviously, yes, it could flip. OpenAI might be able to be more effective and more efficient than Anthropic at some point in the future, but how it stands right now, this isn't really realistic. Now, the compute race is obviously real, but whether compute is even the right race, that's a far more interesting question, and it's going to play out here in the near future. All right, a couple quick releases from the release tracker. Sentence transformers hit version 5.4, and this is multimodal support, so you can now encode, compare text, images, audio, and video, by the way, across the same API. Cross-model search, multimodal RAG pipelines, and one tool is handling all of those formats. And Otherworld, this is really fun, released Waypoint 1.5. This is a video world model that generates interactive environments at up to 720p and 60 frames a second on just consumer GPUs with a 3060p tier for gaming laptops as well. So it's trained on 100 times more data than its predecessor and real-time generated worlds that you can walk through. By the way, that's what this is. And it's on hardware you already own as opposed to having to API it out to another company with more compute. Here's what's staying with me from today. A woman in Germany who was bedridden, receiving daily blood transfusions, whose body was attacking itself in 3 different ways simultaneously. 14 months ago, she received a treatment, and today she takes no medication. And in Washington, the people who keep the global financial system running were pulled into an unscheduled room because of what a single intelligence system can do, and what it means for every system that will come after it. A body that couldn't stop destroying itself, reprogrammed with its own cells. And a financial system that can't wait for its own calendar, responding at a speed institutions haven't shown before. Now, very soon, watch for whether that institutional speed propagates beyond finance. Because if Treasury can move in 48 hours, the question for every other institution is, what's your number? Watch for Fervo's Cape Station to generate its first electrons with a fully domestic supply chain behind it. And watch for the next CAR-T autoimmune trial designs, because if one treatment can handle 3 diseases at once outside of what it was even designed for, then the question becomes how many other conditions share the same targetable mechanism. See you tomorrow.